Today we continue with part 2 of exploring Tanium patching for Linux. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. So this is part 2 of our Linux patching series. And last time we talked about zero-touch patching for Linux, and Jason referenced a knowledge base article to guide you through that. Well, today we're going to continue with more of that article and talk about what happens when you need a light touch patching model. In other words, zero touch, hands off. Maybe that doesn't work in my environment. But then we're also going to wrap up with a look at Tanium Automate as well. They're getting very popular these days. So Jason, welcome back. Why wouldn't a zero touch automation process just be like sunshine and rainbows for everybody? I mean, isn't that what we're going for? Zero touch?
If we lived in an ideal world, that would be great. But one of the things we discussed last time was that patches can be released at any point of the month. And so that really does change the way that we have to handle patching. So the more sensitive customers may require the exact same patch versions across their life cycles. So that's why we need to use a light touch approach.
So I've got different distros, different kind of environments of computing, right? Maybe some mission critical, less critical. So basically, some of those might require some special care and feeding. I thought we were trying to get rid of snowflakes in the world of DevOps, right? So walk us through here.
We're going to talk about, the release schedule for patches for Linux, what we can do about that, right? So if there are patches being released at any point of the month or any day of the month, we want to make sure that we can have a controlled and effective patch automation for those Linux endpoints. And the key thing to remember is that patches for Linux can be made up of one or more packages and dependency packages. And so what I want you to see is I'm going to walk you through a scenario of why zero-touch patching might not work. So let's say you're patching your dev machines. It's the first week of the month, right? You installed all the patches, you verified everything is good. The next week, you decide to install patches on your production machines. But newer patches or dependency versions have been released since last week. So at the time of the deployment, the operating system's package manager performs the dependency resolution and installs the most recent version of the dependency. Now, you have a newer patch or dependency version being installed before they've been tested in dev. So the alternative to that is if, say, a new critical kernel update comes out, and now because maybe you're using a patch list, which we don't recommend, but because you're using that patch list and you said no, only up to a certain date, now that critical security patch for the kernel isn't going to be deployed. So that's why we don't recommend using patch lists for Linux, especially patch lists with release date. But we're still stuck with, what do we do about this? We need a way.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Sorry, that's a good call out because in the Windows world, we're kind of used to this lockstep monthly cadence, but things can come out anytime. And like you said, we've kind of seen this like change control, right? They're expecting, okay, we're going to update to this version on this date, but before we get there, dev tested fine. Between then, we've seen a new patch release, and it could be hidden in that dependency chain. And that's why I think, isn't that why some people would have their own on-prem repo so they can kind of control that environment where the patches are coming from?
Exactly. We have to find a way to ensure the same patch versions and dependencies are installed across the life cycles between those patch deployments. And traditionally, you're right, Linux admins have had to manage their own repository mirrors and servers with snapshots of the metadata and the patches. And this does require building and maintaining infrastructure of servers across your environment. And that's okay. If you want to manage your own repository and snapshots, you can just configure those repositories in Tanium and then use that zero-touch patch automation process we talked about last time. This way you can continue to use your processes for managing your own repositories, but it also means you still need to manage your own repository infrastructure, and that requires time and effort and money, resources. So where Tanium shines is that we have this feature in Tanium Scan to be able to snapshot repository metadata without the need to manage your own repository infrastructure. So in this scenario, the Tanium instance caches the repository metadata at a point in time, which then you can apply to the endpoints and ensure that they deploy the same version of patches and dependencies throughout your patching cycle.
That is snazzy. Wow. I mean, think about all the effort that goes into maintaining a local repo. And now, if I can snapshot the metadata, it's only going to pull. It's got, all those URLs, all those patch downloads are at a point in time. So I don't have to worry about things getting superseded and hidden in that dependency chain. That's nice. All right.
Yeah, and that's what I want to do is show you how you can set this up for yourself. And so first, I want to mention if you go to help.tanium.com, we have an article that describes this whole process. So when you go there, you can search for Linux patch automation. And I didn't even spell it right, but I still found it. So here, effective and controlled Linux patch automation. So this article, if you want some spoilers, you can go ahead and read ahead, but we're going to be focusing on two pieces today, Lite Touch patch automation, and then we'll finish up with phased patch deployments with Tanium Automate. So first, we're going to look at the Lite Touch patch automation for Linux endpoints. Now, it's going to describe the required configurations, which we're going to walk through, and maybe we can just talk about that now, and then we'll switch to the console and build it out. So really what we need is two or more of the following. And when I say two or more, that means I'm assuming you have more than one ring of deployment, right? So you might have dev and production, or maybe you have 4 rings of deployment. And so you'll need a computer group for each ring, a repository snapshot for each ring, a scan configuration, and deployments. So we need 2 or more of those, and we'll walk through how to build those out. But then the process for the monthly patch process, or whenever, however often you need to do it. So your patch cycle would begin, and maybe that's monthly or quarterly, depending on how you patch your Linux systems. But when that patch cycle begins, the first step you do is you take a snapshot. You want to make sure you lock that repository metadata at a point in time. Then you update the ring 1 scan configuration to use that new snapshot. So now ring 1 has the new patches, the new metadata. It can start to act on those. So ring 1 deployment automation will install those new patches within their maintenance windows. Now I overlooked this, but we're going to keep the other rings in their old repository snapshots. So they're still locked in time at a previous point in time. They're not getting the new patches yet. So ring 1 deploys the patches. We validate. Now we can update ring 2 scan configuration. Now those patches for ring 2 are approved and released to go out to ring 2. The ring 2 deployment automation installs those patches in the maintenance windows. And then we can repeat this for as many rings as we have. And then we repeat the entire process at the beginning of the next patch cycle.
So what I hear you saying there is, okay, I don't have to maintain my own repro infrastructure, but there is going to be, we call this light touch. I'm going to have to make that snapshot and make sure that that's referenced as part of the patching cycle.
Yeah, the light touch will come in, and I'll walk you through each of those processes. But the first light touch is you got to take the snapshot, and then and as you approve each ring scan configuration, you use the new snapshot. So you may have 3, 4, 5 touches a month max. And the advanced people out there know that we have an API. You could really automate this whole thing if you really wanted to. But this light touch method will be a nice way to have that controlled Linux patching, and you still have your human in the loop. So let's head into the patch module here, and I'm going to navigate to scan management, and I'm going to look at repositories. So this is where all the repositories live. There's a number of them already built in for all the Linux distributions that we support. And of course, you can add some more. But I'm going to actually focus on Rocky Linux during this video, but we also support other repositories and distributions. And we support Red Hat too, but you do need to upload your entitlement certificate to the console. And we have a KB article that explains that process. So the first thing I want to do is look for my Rocky repositories. Not all Linux distributions support the Tanium scan repo snapshot, but you can certainly use this for the ones that do support it. So what I'm going to do is select these repositories for Rocky Linux, and I'm going to click Create Snapshot. Now, what I recommend you do is you use a helpful or use a standard naming convention. I just use the date. So I do year, month, and I don't even know what today's date is, 24th, and then Rocky. So I'm going to say that today's date and the distribution, and then I can click confirm. Now, in the background, Tanium is going to be performing those repository snapshots on these. And I can expand these to see my previous repository snapshots, as well as the one that's in progress right now. Now, this can take several minutes to complete. So what I like to do is give it a few minutes. We can come back and check on that. But what we'll do in the meantime is we'll build out our scan configurations.
So, Jason, just to clarify, that's just the metadata. That's not actually downloading all the patch files. It's just the list of patches and versions and source URLs, right?
That's correct. This is a repository snapshot of the metadata only. The package files will still remain in the source repository, but as we will recommend, you'll use with the automation is to download immediately to ensure that you get those patch files already cached immediately. So the scan configurations we're going to create three of these. We're going to call it Lite Touch Tanium Scan Ring 1. Okay, so we're going to have three rings in our demo here, and I'm going to select the platform of Linux. And we're going to use Tanium scan. And then I'm going to proceed with adding all my Rocky distribution repositories. Now there's 6 of them here. I can continue with adding each of those. It just takes a minute or two. I'm going to skip that for now and talk about the rest of the configuration. So we're going to scan at least once a day. It's recommended. Use that random scan delay so they're not all scanning at the same time. Then we're going to create that scan configuration. I've already done that. I want to show you what that looks like. So I have my 3 Lite Touch scan configurations, and then I assign this configuration to my Ring 1 endpoints. So I'm going to select my Ring 1 endpoints here. So that way Ring 1 is enforced to this scan configuration. When I build these 3 scan configurations, my next step is to set the priority. Right. So again, we talked about this in the previous episode, but it's good to remind everybody that an endpoint can only have 1 in 4 scan configurations. So we want to make sure we have them in the right order, right, to ensure that the correct scan configuration is set. So we can use the prioritize button and set the order for our scan configurations. And then the next step after that is to assign a snapshot to each of these, right? So since we're starting off this process, we want them all to be at, say, an older standard same snapshot. So what I do is I hit this edit button on the snapshot, and it brings up the list of the available snapshots that I can select. So for this purpose, we're going to set them all to the same value of a particular point in time. So now all 3 of my rings are using the same snapshot version from March 19th. And we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this screen after we create our deployment.
All right, so just to recap, so we're scanning at a previous point in time, whatever your company's policy is here on how fresh those patches need to remain. So anything that's been released after that, we're not really scanning for. And this is per ring. So different groups of computers all scanning on the exact same date of snapshot.
Yeah, and that's a good point and a key definition. These repository snapshots are for scanning, but more importantly, they're for deployments. Why that's important is we actually scan both with the snapshot and with the latest repository metadata so that you still have visibility as to which security patches are missing. So you'll see that as well. But when it comes time to actually do the deployment, it will only deploy patches that are available from that specific repository snapshot point in time.
Okay, so when we do the scans, we'll see what all the current patches are outstanding, but we're only going to deploy from that date and time. So you're showing those bar graphs on the last episode. So those bar graphs are going to climb as patches are released, but then we're not taking it all the way to 0. We're taking it down to the last date and point in time. Got it.
You got it. So what we're going to do next is we're going to build out the deployments. So we've got 3 scan configurations for 3 rings, and they're all currently scanning at the same point in time for deployments. So they'll be deploying the same set of patches across the rings. But first we gotta actually build those deployments. So we're going to create a new deployment. We're going to call it Linux Ring 1. It's a Linux platform. Again, we have to make that decision. We want to install all the updates from that repository snapshot or just the security updates. Again, it's up to your organization to decide. I'm going to recommend you install all the updates. Who gets this deployment? Well, our ring 1 is going to get this deployment. So we're going to target ring 1. And then because we're doing automation, we want ongoing deployments, and we want to distribute it over time so that they're not all trying to install the updates at the exact same time. And then we do want to download immediately because we want to make sure those patches from that point in time, that previous point in time, are going to be available and downloaded and ready to go. And then we want to select restart if that's what your organization wants. Now, we covered this last time as well. If a Linux patch is installed, it doesn't need a restart, we won't restart the endpoint. But if, say, a kernel update comes out, then we'll restart the endpoint if you told us to. So then we go ahead and preview and deploy. Again, I've already have this built out, so we can just take a look that I have these Linux deployments. So I've got 3 deployments, 1, 2, and 3. And I can see that, the status of those deployments and the endpoints that are targeted for that. So these deployments then are automatically going out to the endpoints. And if we review the process of our Lite Touch method, we need to start a new patching cycle. So let's pretend it's a new patching cycle. We just took that snapshot. I don't know if it's completed yet, but I am going to choose a newer date. So, okay, so 4/24. So this is our latest snapshot. I'm going to say, let's move ring 1 to the latest snapshot. So with our deployment automation, ring 1 endpoints are going to rescan and now see that they have new patches to deploy, and deploy patches and their dependencies up to the current date and time. And then the
That was
light touch
my
met.
question. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So what does it look like? So you set these up. We're kind of walking through this very first build here, but like month to month, then all I have to do is if I can I set my deployment to be just like open ended and just come in and update the snapshot each month? Is that kind of what's my monthly update look like?
Yeah, let's walk through that. Now that we have it all set up. So if we go back to the beginning, the first step in our patching cycle is we're going to go to our repositories and take that repository snapshot, right? So it's a new month, it's a new quarter. Let's snapshot the repos that we care about. Again, I'm using Rocky. You can use whatever repos you need. Once we create that snapshot, which we did earlier, the one for today, now my next step is to apply that snapshot to ring 1. So I go to ring 1 and I select to use the latest repository snapshot. Now those deployments we built are ongoing. So ring 1's those endpoints are going to say, I have new patches to do. So it will download those patches, queue them up for their maintenance window, then install and restart if necessary. Once I've ring 1 is done, tested, verified, then I can come into scan management again, and then I can move ring 2 to the latest repository snapshot.
And they've already
And
got
then,
maintenance windows defined, so
yes,
they'll just kind of flow right into those maintenance windows. So this is not bad, actually. It really is a light touch. I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to be so light after all, but that makes it pretty easy.
yeah, with 3 rings, I think I've got like maybe 5, maybe 3, 4, 5 touches that I have to make. And that's not bad at all, right? That's I mean, the time that it takes me to select this, I've just moved it forward to full production. Like that's it. That's the light touch patch automation, and that's very doable. And again, we have an API, so if you wanted to use some form of API and approval process and make this change, you could do that as well.
And again, going back to the beginning, the alternative is maintaining your own repos entirely. And maybe you just have to do that because of some unique requirements in your environment. But if you can use this, wow, this is so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the light touch method. And well, what I wanted to do is, we talked about this method and we talked about these multiple deployments, and it's really not that bad to set up. You can just follow the KB article, but I wanted to talk about how you could do a phased patching approach using Tanium Automate, right? So we've got multiple phases of patch deployments we need to do, but sometimes we might have to add pre and post activities to our patching process, such as like stopping services, starting services, etc. Now, thankfully, for using Automate, we're going to use almost all the same type of components that we created for the Lite Touch. So if you've done the work there, you can almost reuse everything for Automate. But instead of building out deployments, we're going to use an Automate playbook. So what do we need? We need maintenance windows, of course. Don't forget your maintenance windows. We're going to need two or more computer groups, such as ring 1, 2, and 3. We're going to need repository snapshots, which we've already done. We need one scan configuration with that repository snapshot, which I have here. We'll walk through that. And then we need one automate playbook. So let's step through that. Well, first, before we build that, let's talk about the high-level patch process with automate. So similarly, the cycle is going to begin weekly, monthly, quarterly, or whatever. We're going to perform that repository snapshot. So we'll select our repositories. We'll create the snapshot. That's the beginning of the patch cycle.
So that's still
Then we're going to,
manual. That
that's still
snapshot
manual.
process is still manual, not part of the automate playbook. Okay.
Right. Correct. And that's again so that we can ensure that the same level of patches are deployed throughout our phasing of deployment. And so then I built out this Lite Touch Tanium scan for Automate. And it has the same Rocky repositories just for example purposes as well as snapshots. And then I assigned that to a group called my Patch Automate servers, but you can again use your own built-in computer groups that you've made. So the patching cycle begins. We take a snapshot of that repository, and then we can move this forward to the most recent snapshot. Then our playbook automation begins by patching ring 1 with any pre and post activities and verification steps. Then it moves on to ring 2, pre and post actions, verification steps, and then it repeats that process for as many rings as you need. And then, of course, we repeat the playbook each patch cycle.
I think about playbooks and automate. In this case, we don't have to worry about like moving date values anywhere because that happens with the snapshot that you've already done here with the Light Touch.
That's correct. So if I'll show you what it looks like, but basically we're going to be phasing a deployment to ring 1, ring 2, ring 3 within the playbook, making sure they're all using that same snapshot, repository snapshot. So I'm going to go to Automate Playbooks, and I'm going to click Create Playbook. So I can call this Phased Patch Deployment Linux, give it your own name. You can add your own notifications if you want to be notified when the playbook runs or if it runs into any problems. But the main thing we want to do is we want to add a couple of steps. So there's a lot of steps here, but we want to be able to do a patch deployment. And here we want to do a phased patch deployment for Linux ring 1. Okay, so we have this ring 1, we want to do a patch deployment. So we're going to create a deployment. And this process we're following is just what we did for Lite Touch, but we're just doing it through Automate. I'm going to give it a name, select the platform. I'm going to choose all updates. Then I'm going to choose my ring 1. And then we're going to choose to make sure that if we want to restart or not. Now, this one time is important. You can't really change. We're going to start the deployment when the playbook starts. So the scheduling is you can still add a distribute over time if you'd like, but the actual starting of this deployment will depend upon when you execute the playbook, which can be manual or scheduled.
And again,
So I'll
that's
fill
going to
that.
follow the maintenance windows, so you don't have to worry about it doing
Right.
anything when it's not supposed to.
Correct. The checkbox here to override maintenance windows will be left unchecked unless you really want to, but it's recommended, right? Have your good defined maintenance windows so that the automation happens within the defined maintenance windows. So I can hit preview to continue and then apply, and then I can specify how long do I want ring 1 to last. So let's say we want just 72 hours, right? We're going to make sure that at least ring 1, we give it a couple of days for all those endpoints to download, install their patches, restart if necessary within their defined maintenance windows. You define what you want this to be. This could be longer if you need to. And then do we want to move on to step two? If all endpoints completed successfully, any of them, or maybe we just want to say, look, if we got like 80% successfully installed, then let's go ahead and move forward. So if I do that, then I can add another step and then proceed to do ring 2 patch deployment. So I'm going to just repeat this process for ring 1, but then instead do ring 2 and create another deployment. Now I've already built this out. So what
And
I want
just
to
to
do,
point
go
out
ahead.
here, so we recently did an episode on Windows SQL cluster patching with Tanium Automate. You could review that as and kind of template that in your mind here to Linux as well, right? Because you can write any of your own shell scripts, custom sensors and packages to go check for service status and all that stuff before moving through the rings, so you can make sure everything's good.
That's correct. And this phasing approach for Linux patching that we're walking through can be used for Windows too. So if you want to do a phase-based approach to your Windows workstations and do like 10%, 30%, 50%, 100%, you can walk through the same process but use Windows deployments and Windows computer groups. I'm going to cancel this and show you the complete playbook and what it looks like. And so actually I'll go into the edit mode so you can see what it looks like from the edit mode. So what I've done is I have my 3 patch deployments, ring 1, ring 2, ring 3. But as you can see, I have these pre and post activities. And these are just examples, but it does show what you could do, right, with Tanium Automate. So in this case, I want to stop a specific service before I move into patching these endpoints. Now I'm just going to stop the cron service. Maybe I have a good reason, maybe I don't, but I'm going to stop the cron service on my ring 1, and then I'm going to patch ring 1. And they're going to restart, but just in case, I'm going to make sure that the cron service is started after the deployment. Then I'll proceed to ring 2, stop the cron service, install the patches, start the cron service, and repeat. And I can repeat this for as many rings as necessary.
Imagine you could also put some checks in there to validate that whatever application services are responding on the ports that should be open, and maybe make some API calls, make sure things are talking before you move to the next step.
Yeah, and that would be ideal, right? When we talk about automation, again, we want to start somewhere and see what we can do, and then we want to iterate on it and make it better and make it better. To get us time back, right? A lot of times we're spending hours late at night, middle of the night, early morning, still have to come in the next day, even though we didn't get much sleep, because something might have broke and I need to be on call to fix it, and you're just running on empty. So let's see what we can do to automate and get our lives back. Now, this playbook can then be ran on demand. So let's say it's the beginning of the patch cycle. I take my repository snapshot. I set my scan config to use the new snapshot. Then I start my playbook manually. That's possible. You can also schedule, right? So if you wanted to say, I want to run this once a month on the 3rd of the month, right? So we have different scheduling options available to automate, right? So you can schedule these playbooks to run at different times of the day or the month. And if you're advanced, you can also look up how to write cron expressions and paste those in here to use that for scheduling as well.
So if I've scheduled my automate playbook to run automatically, then the only thing left to do is just manually go in and refresh those snapshots and update them on the scans.
That's correct.
Man, we've covered a lot of nice options here, Jason. Um, this is what Tanium brings to the cross-platform patching experience. Wow. Um, so we've talked about several techniques. Are there any kind of customer sentiment like? This is not a fair question, right? It's going to be really based on every customer's unique scenarios. But what seems to be the most common?
The light touch patch automation we talked about last time is good for maybe a small organization or endpoints that don't need that specific controlled patch version. But in more larger organizations or more mature Linux shops where they do require this, this ability to snapshot repositories and reduce infrastructure, their own repositories, or eliminate it, and all the time, effort, and resources to manage all that, the Linux admins, their eyes light up because they get it. They're like, I've been doing all this work and I won't have to do that anymore because Tanium Patch will do it for me.
That's fantastic. Well, Jason, anything else as we wrap up this first two parts of the Linux series?
The only other thing I'd mention is, showing your work, right? We always talk about being able to show how effective we're being, whether we're using zero touch, light touch, automate, or maybe a combination of all of them, right? And maybe even manual deployments. That's fine too. But we want to be make sure that whatever methods we're using or combination of methods we're using, that we're able to show our work. And what the outcome is for patching is patch compliance, right? We want to make sure all the security patches or all the patches that we care about have been deployed across our endpoints. And so I've gone to the endpoint management dashboard. It's built in, and I selected the all Linux computer group so I can look at the statistics and metrics around my Linux endpoints. And most importantly, we want to focus on is OS patch compliance, right? We want to make sure that how are we doing today? I need to give a number to my manager or to the organization for SLA purposes that I'm 94% compliant. And I've got how many machines are not compliant, and I can also look at that over time. Like now that we've implemented these various automation processes, how are we doing with becoming more compliant with less effort? That's really where we want to get. And we do have the ability for your own teams to say, okay, look, I know that we're doing automation. We've got compliance that we can send out to other teams and up to our leaders. But for us, maybe we need to know which endpoints do we need to focus on that need the most help, right? How far out of compliance are they? I've got a machine that's missing 26 to 50 patches. Okay, that's a red flag for me. I need to make sure I can drill into that and maybe take a look to see what's going on that machine and make sure that it's doing its patching properly.
Well, Jason, wow. So many options here for Linux patch admins to choose from. Thank you for these walkthroughs on these different techniques. And folks, as usual, in the show notes below, there's a link to this walkthrough article as well as some other Linux patching resources over at the Tanium Resource Center. Until next time, go Tanium.